He stood in front of the entire world, cameras flashing, microphones pointed straight at him. And he said her name, not Meghan, not Harry. He said Diana. He looked directly into those lenses and compared the treatment of this pregnant woman to the media storm that killed a princess. That is not a casual celebrity comment. That is a man lighting a match and dropping it on his own reputation. And then 6 years later, without a single word, without one explanation, without even a goodbye, he vanished. Not dramatically, not loudly. He just quietly became someone who no longer answered. And here is the part that will stay with you long after this is over. Harry never saw it coming, not even close. The man who once felt like the most solid wall in his entire California dream had already walked away long before Harry even realized the room was empty. That detail, that one small devastating detail, changes everything about how you hear this story. So stay with me, because by the time we reach the end, you are going to understand something about loyalty, about Hollywood, about human nature, that most people spend their entire lives never figuring out. Let me take you back to the beginning. Not 2019, not even 2018. I want you to go back further than that. Back to a version of Harry that most people have already forgotten. A young man who grew up inside walls so thick, so ancient, so suffocating, that the outside world barely felt real to him. He was born into an institution that had existed for centuries before him, and would exist for centuries after him. Every decision, every relationship, every public appearance was managed, filtered, controlled. He had protection. He had privilege. But he did not have freedom. And somewhere underneath all the uniforms and the protocols in the palace corridors, there was a person who just wanted something real. Something that belonged to him and not to the crown. And when he met Meghan, something in him decided for the first time in his life to bet everything on himself. To walk away from the only world he had ever known and build something completely new on the other side of the ocean. That decision took a specific kind of courage that most people will never fully understand. Because it wasn't just leaving a job. It wasn't just moving to a new city. It was stepping off a cliff and trusting that something would catch him before he hit the ground. And for a moment, it looked like something did. The year is 2018, St. George's Chapel. One of the most watched weddings on the planet. And look at that guest list. Really look at it. David Beckham, Idris Elba, Serena Williams, Oprah Winfrey. Sitting somewhere in that extraordinary room, George Clooney and his wife Amal. Now understand what that means. George Clooney is not someone who attends things because he is starstruck. This is a man who spends his time in rooms with heads of state, with international institutions, with the most powerful people alive. He does not chase proximity to fame. Fame chases him. And Amal Clooney is one of the most respected human rights lawyers on the entire planet. When these two walk into a room, they are not the ones looking up at the ceiling in awe. They are the ceiling. So their presence at that wedding said something specific and something loud. It said the Sussexes had arrived. Not just in Hollywood, not just in entertainment, at the very top of the global elite, the actual summit, and then it went even further. Because months after the wedding, Harry and Meghan were reportedly invited to something that almost nobody gets invited to. George Clooney's private villa on the shores of Lake Como, one of the most exclusive, most protected, most coveted addresses in the world among people who can literally go anywhere. That villa is not a place you bring someone you met at a party. That is not a courtesy extended to a wedding acquaintance. That is a door you only open for people you have genuinely decided to let in. And Harry and Meghan walked through it. In that moment, the friendship felt like something permanent. Something real. Something built to last. But here is a detail that should have made everyone pay closer attention. Even as the friendship reportedly grew warmer behind closed doors, this famous couple never once allowed themselves to be photographed publicly alongside Harry and Meghan after that wedding day. Think about that. Famous people photograph everything. Celebrity friendships generate a constant drip of casual images, tagged posts, red carpet moments, the quiet visual language that says to the world, yes, we are close. Yes, this is real. None of that ever came from this side. Not one photograph, not one public tag, not one joint appearance at any event anywhere. At the time, most people didn't notice. But looking back now, that restraint feels less like privacy and more like something else entirely. Like someone keeping one foot on solid ground just in case the floor on the other side turned out to be less stable than it looked. Then comes 2019, and everything changes. Meghan is pregnant. The British press is relentless. The headlines are cruel. The coverage is suffocating. And the pressure on this woman is building to something that feels genuinely dangerous. And George Clooney walks up to the microphones, and he doesn't give the safe answer. He doesn't offer the careful, hedged, celebrity-approved statement designed to support without actually costing anything. He goes all the way. He says the press is doing to Meghan exactly what it did to Diana. He says it plainly. He says it publicly. He says it with his full name attached. Now pause and really feel the weight of what that means. Diana is not just a name in Harry's life. Diana is the wound that never fully healed. Diana is the loss that shaped everything. The absence that followed him from childhood into adulthood and never once let go. For someone to stand up in public and connect the treatment of his wife to the death of his mother, that reaches somewhere that ordinary support simply cannot touch. It doesn't just feel like loyalty. It feels like someone finally seeing the full picture of your pain and choosing to stand in it with you anyway. Harry must have felt in that moment that this friendship was forged in something unbreakable. You don't say something like that and then disappear. You don't reach that deep into someone's grief and then quietly close the door. Or so Harry believed. But here's the thing about grand gestures. The bigger they are, the louder the silence that follows them becomes. Because after 2019, something shifted. Slowly, quietly, almost imperceptibly at first. The Sussex story kept moving and it kept getting louder. The decision to step back from royal duties in 2020. The move to California. The Oprah interview in 2021, watched by over 17 million people in the UK alone, where deeply personal claims about the royal family were shared with the entire planet. The Netflix documentary in 2022, which pulled back every curtain that had remained even slightly closed. And then the memoir, Spare, at the start of 2023. A book so specific, so detailed, so unflinching in its characterizations of living family members, that it didn't just make headlines. It rewrote the entire public record of what the royal family was, what it did, and what it failed to do. Each chapter of this story escalated. Each one added more weight to a narrative that was becoming harder and harder to stand near, without getting pulled into the current. And through all of it, through every single major Sussex moment that lit up the global news cycle, George Clooney said absolutely nothing. Not during the Oprah interview, not during the documentary, not during the memoir fallout, not during any of the legal battles, not once. And for someone who speaks up about everything he cares about, who has used his platform on genocide, on press freedom, on political corruption, on injustice of every kind, that silence was not neutral. That silence was a message. It was just a message delivered so quietly that Harry, apparently, didn't hear it, until it was far too late. Because what happened next is not the part anyone expected. According to multiple reports that have circulated across credible outlets covering this story, Harry reached out. He tried to maintain the connection. He sent messages. He attempted to arrange conversations. And what came back was not hostility. It was not confrontation. It was something far more disorienting. Politeness, warmth on the surface, emptiness underneath. Meetings discussed but never quite materializing. Calls that were technically returned but carried none of the energy of the earlier period. The kind of interaction where someone is still technically present, but something essential behind their eyes has already left the building. And that specific texture of experience, that particular emotional climate, is one of the hardest things a human being can navigate, because your brain doesn't know what to do with it. When someone hurts you directly, your nervous system knows how to respond. There's anger, there's grief, there's a story you can tell yourself about what happened and why. But when someone simply becomes gradually less available, less warm, less real, your brain has no clean category for it. It keeps searching. It keeps replaying the last good conversation, scanning it for the sentence that went wrong, hunting for the moment the temperature dropped. It cannot close the loop because the loop was never officially opened. The friendship didn't end. It just stopped being visible. And that distinction, that gap between an ending and a disappearance, is where the real pain lives.